All right. Hello. It looks like we're live. Welcome to my Ask Me Anything session. And before I get started, let me just acknowledge that today is Martin Luther King Jr. birthday holiday. So I want to acknowledge that. He has always been one of my most inspirational heroes and leaders. So I want to make sure that we pay deference and give that opportunity. All right. For those of you that have joined, this is an Ask Me Anything session that I do once a month. It's my way of trying to share, give back, and just provide perspectives to people in an informal way. I find that meeting with people one on one, I don't have time to do, but at least this way I can hopefully share some things that will help others because I find many questions that people have, others might also learn something from. So hopefully that's the case for you. So, I'm Shellye Archambeau. I'm the author of Unapologetically Ambitious, and I've spent my entire career in tech. And I am happy that you are joining today. So, let's dive in, as I usually do. So, first, I have questions that people submitted, so I'll go through those. But I also always look at the chat. So, if you have something or a question, clarification, anything comes up, just pop it into the chat, and I'm happy to address it. All right. Well, welcome everybody. And here we go. First question. And there are quite a few today, so I'm going to pop through these things. Here we go. First question. How did you develop executive presence? Well, that's a good question. And it's something that, frankly, I think is quite important for people who want to rise up to levels of leadership. So, how do you do it? Well, for me, early on, it was watching other people. So I'd look at people that I felt had good executive presence, people who, when they spoke or when they entered a room, people paid attention and tried to see what is it they're doing and how can I incorporate some of those characteristics in my own style. So that's one. And what I learned personally is a combination of posture. I mean, if you see me do anything, I've always got good posture. Why? Because I find that people who actually have good posture, by definition of how they carry themselves, exude a level of confidence just in posture. And then, second point, which I just alluded to, which is confidence. People tend to be attracted to people who are confident. So, even if you aren't confident at the moment, it's important to at least act confident. Be calm, be measured, right? All those things. So, figure out for yourself how can you exude that level of confidence. Now, I'll also tell you the good news is there's a book out now that wasn't out when I was rising through my career, and it's called Executive Presence, of all names. And the author, matter of fact, I went and looked it up because I didn't know. Here we go. The author is Sylvia Ann Hewitt. And I highly recommend take a look at the book for those of you that are trying to build your executive presence. Because honestly, it's not just do step one, step two, step three. It really is figuring out how can you incorporate elements of presence and confidence into your own style. Because trust me, if you're not authentic to your own style, you're not going to come across authentic to anyone else. And it's going to be very difficult to exude, whether that's executive presence or, frankly, anything else. So take a look, pay attention to others that you see and that you admire, and figure out how can you incorporate things into your own approach. And I see one question already came through in the chat. Can an idea be taken to a mentor investor before it's executed? So the answer is absolutely. I think it's actually quite important to get input on ideas before you execute. Hold on. Sorry. Those of you who have joined before know that I suffer from allergies. And right now I'm in Florida, and even though it's January, things are booming. But back to the question about ideas. I find that if you have an idea or a thought, the best thing to do is to actually share it with others, get input, get ideas, and see if you can make it better before you actually execute it. So definitely take it to mentors and advisors. My apologies, everyone. All right, next question. Here's a broad one, so I'm going to duck this one. What challenges did you experience as a woman of color, and how did you overcome them? Frankly, it's a way too broad a question for asking me anything. I'm almost I'll be 60 this year. I'm almost 60 years old. Ton of things have happened. My best advice, if you really want to know, is read my book, Unapologetically Ambitious. Okay, next. Last but not least, you mentioned in your book that you joined Toastmasters to improve your speaking skill. How did it help you? Well, public speaking is like any other skill, which means to get good at it, you have to practice. And you also need feedback. You need to understand how you can make things better. It's like a sport. That's why you have coaches. Because even if you just practice, if you never get input on, pardon me, if you never get input on how you can make it better or what you can do differently, etc., then practicing the exact same thing all the time is just going to make you good at your current level. But if you want to actually improve, then you need feedback so that you can practice, raise the bar, practice. What Toastmasters does, hold on, getting some water. What Toastmasters does is it gives you the opportunity to practice, but then, most importantly, you get feedback. And in that feedback, you get the chance to improve. Plus, it's a safe environment. Most people only practice public speaking when they have to, which means that every time they do, they're on stage, whether it's virtually or physically. And every time counts, which is why it always feels so pressured. Find a way to practice. And for me, that was Toastmasters. Here's a new question in the chat. When taking on leadership of a new team, what are the best things you like to focus on in the first 90 days? First, I have to get to know the team. Who are they? Skills, strengths, what are their aspirations? And how can I help them in the role they have? So that's the team. Second, I make sure that I understand how I'm being measured. Now, when I say that, I'm not talking about the job description. As a matter of fact, I find many times how you're actually being measured and what is considered success is different from the job description. So make sure you ask your boss when you take over a new team, how am I being measured? What will success look like in a year? So that you understand exactly what you need to do to be successful. Third, I then look at the stakeholders that I need to interact with in order to achieve my overall objectives. And I work to build those relationships. So first three things, those are the first three things. Now, once I get past those first three things, then I look at what I'm actually need to do, what I need to go get it done, and then I communicate. I share with my boss what I'm doing, why I'm doing it. I share with the team what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. And why do I do that? Because I want input. It goes back to the first question. If you have an idea of something that you can do or a new initiative you want to drive, get input before you actually execute, because it'll make it better. And I find the best input comes from the team itself, as well as from your boss and from other stakeholders. So get people involved in what it is that you're trying to do. And then the benefit of that is that they understand what you're actually doing and what you're trying to do and what your intent is. So even if you make mistakes, they know that your intent is right? And I find when you do that, people will actually help and support you as you go forward. And make sure during those 90 days that you are actually tangibly accomplishing something so that you can point to, here are your early wins. Because people are watching you to say, okay, are you really going to make an impact or not? All right, next question. During your quest, did you put any weight on furthering your education besides Toastmasters? Is this something of importance, or is it boots on the ground, a more effective approach? Actually, both are important. I think that continual learning is critical to long-term success. I'm still learning. Now, how do you learn? All different kinds of ways. It can be reading, just like I pointed out the book earlier. It can be conferences you're attending. It can be courses that you take. But I try to take advantage of all kinds of opportunities, and I still do. I sit on public boards today, and I just signed up for a NACD, right, class that's going to happen this summer just to get my board skills, right, up to date. So it's important that you're continually investing in yourself, because that's how I look at it. Because if you're not going to invest in yourself and you're not willing to take the time, energy, dollars to do it, why should somebody else invest in you? Invest in yourself first. And then with regards to boots to the ground, meaning hard work, yes, absolutely on the job. And you will learn a lot on the job. But I see it as a combination, because at the end of the day, you're actually competing every step of the way, whether you get new responsibilities, new jobs, promotions, new opportunities, right? There are a lot of people out in the world that can do the same job that you can do. So how will you stand out? How will you differentiate yourself? And that's a combination of the experience that you bring, the knowledge that you have. In the pandemic, when running into people is not happening, how do I adopt mentors? How do I pop that yes or no question? Is it an unscheduled call? Is it a scheduled meeting? Is it email? Great question. Because trust me, during these times, it's much harder to network than ever, because you're right, people are not gathering like they used to gather. So let me give you a few tips. One is be the first on the Zoom calls. Right now we have Zoom meetings, etc., and everybody logs in. It typically takes a couple minutes for everybody to get there. Hold on. Oh, can't wait till this period's over. Anyway, once everybody logs in, then, right, the meeting goes on. But if you're first on the Zoom, then as people come on, you can actually be the one that welcomes people, right? You're on first and you say, oh, hi, Tanisha, welcome. John, great to see you, right? Blah, blah, blah. What does that do? It kind of keeps you in the conversation. If you notice, sometimes when you join a Zoom, there's already a conversation going on, but you're not necessarily part of it because you've joined next, right? Or last. Try to be the first. It gives you a chance for people who join early to have that informal chit chat, right? So that's one. Two, follow up with people, right? So now you're on the Zoom, somebody's joining. It might be somebody you want to talk to, you want to talk to later about something, etc. You can pop the question then. You can say, oh, I'm so glad you're on already. I was wondering, after this call, do you have 5 minutes? Or is there some time tomorrow that we could just do a quick touch base? There's blah, 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 and give the reason why, right? The other thing you can use is chat. In a chat, just send a direct message to somebody about, hey, I really appreciate that comment that you made. I'm facing something very similar. Would love if I could grab just 2 minutes to blah, 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 right? Or instead of grabbing 2 minutes, you can say, hey, would you mind sharing your email? And I can drop you an email for the follow-up. So you have to come up with more creative and different ways now. It's not as easy as just bumping into people, but you absolutely can do it. And you take the similar approach. Just use email, text, Zoom, whatever it might be, in terms of to make those things happen. So it takes more intention, right? There'll be less serendipity in this environment, but with intention, you can still accomplish the same thing. Shellye, I've been a manager for a year now, and recently I've received a senior manager offer from another company. I do enjoy my current role, but I'm also determined in growing my career to reach executive level in the future. Would you advise to always go for the better offer title when facing career choices? And from your experience, can someone be promoted too early? How did you know when you're ready? Okay, so first, actually, no, I don't recommend always going for the best offer title. I see that as being a bit mercenary, and I've never been mercenary, because the best offer or title may not actually be the best job to get you where it is that you're trying to go. I can remember being offered a really good role in running HR when I was earlier in my career. It would have been a promotion and it would have been a raise. That was not going to put me on the path to be CEO that I wanted. So, no, I didn't take that role. Later, I was offered a role to actually head up an association, an industry association, right? Pay was better, right? All those things. But that was not what I wanted to do. I was heading towards CEO. So, no, keep your goal in mind and look at the jobs that you have in front of you in terms of are they going to put you on the path to best compete for that role or that objective that you're going after. Second, be also very careful about just jumping companies. And let me explain. When you work for a company, you are actually building relationships far beyond your actually job and role. And you're building support because people get to know you, you build a reputation, right? All those things. When you take on a new job in a new company, yes, it might be a higher title, yes, it might be more pay, but you're starting at ground zero in terms of building those relationships, building that support, etc. So it actually isn't a straight up. It's yes, it's an up, but it's a bit of a sideways and a bit of down that you have to rebuild, right, to get caught up again. So realize there is a cost to changing companies. You like your current role, you like what you're doing. My first approach when you're looking at those things is have you had a conversation with your own company, with your own manager, HR, et cetera, about what your aspirations are and what you're trying to do? And if a senior manager role, right, is one that makes sense and is next, where are you with your current company? Is that something that they also see for you? Are there some skills or experiences, et cetera, that they want you to have before they think you're ready for it? And then how does that feel with regards to whether you think you're ready? Because here's the other thing I've seen happen. I've seen people move pretty quickly early on, bounce, 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 and then they get stuck. And one of the reasons they get stuck is they actually didn't build some of the core competencies early on, and therefore it now comes back to roost. Because remember, you're competing against others for the next job. So if other people actually built those skills and competencies and you didn't, even though your titles are the same, your performance is not going to be the same. So how do you know you're ready? I always look at, am I learning? What's the feedback I'm getting from employees, from my team, from peers, from boss, whatever, about the job and role that I'm doing? What's the formal feedback, right? Are there big gaps and things that I'm still trying to close, et cetera, and or not? So you want to have a good self-awareness of where you are. Now, that said, I absolutely don't believe that you should be 100% quote ready for that next job before you take it. I mean, when you take on a promotion, the whole idea is you haven't done that job before, so you will be learning right on the job. But you need to just balance it to make sure that you've learned what you need to learn at the current job and the current level before moving. But as soon as you're at the point where, you know what, I'm not learning as much, I do feel I have all the skills, I'm getting the feedback that I'm ready for the next role, well, then it's time to start pushing for that next role. Always target first, if you like your company and you like the team and management, try to see if you can make it happen there, because then you get to leverage off all those relationships that you built and the support that you built, which will indeed help you later. And if you can't, then change jobs, but realize you're going to have to spend time building that up again. Let's see. How do you debunk the stigma that employees must be at a certain level for a certain period of time? That's really easy. It all comes down to performance. Performance. I mean, if you nail the job, you've got it done, you're achieving it and doing better, delivering better results than anybody else in terms of in the job, performance proves it. I've had several roles where I was not in the job as long as people are typically in the job, right? It's performance. But I've also had jobs where I was in a little bit longer than I thought I should be in the job, right? So sometimes a little bit of patience. And or if that happens, then you have to take matters into your own hands, right? And figure out how you improve that. And I've done that too. All those things I talk about in terms of in the book. But at the end of the day, when you say, how do you debunk that you have to be in jobs certain length of time, et cetera, to me, it all comes down to performance. Because then you can have the conversation with your manager to say, okay, here's the job you asked me to do. Here's what I've done. And here's what I've done beyond that. I feel I'm ready for more responsibility. What more is it, right, that you're looking to see? And if all they say is time in role, right, you don't necessarily need to accept that. And you can just share, I understand, but if I've actually done all this already, I'm ready for more. And I'd rather take on more responsibility here than have to consider other things, right? So you can have the conversation, but it all comes down to performance. How do you transition to managing people who used to be your peers or leaders? Servant leadership is the management style that I've always practiced, and I feel it's the best. So if you have to manage people that used to be your peers, you don't want to come at it at a very autocratic method, right? They don't see you that way. And people will take kind of offense at times. Like, wait a minute, it used to be one of us, and now I'm reporting to you, and now you're suddenly going to be autocratic. You want to work in a way in which people feel, hey, I'm here to support you. I'm here to help you be successful. That's what servant leadership is. And if people genuinely feel that, right, then I find they're very happy to work with you. And if you're able to help them grow and develop and stretch, right, and bring on new opportunities, etc., then they're very happy to work for you. So look at the approach that you're using. But you have to be extra careful because it is harder to take on that role of managing people who used to be your peers than it is people who are brand new. And you want to acknowledge it. You can say, hey, listen, I know this is a little awkward, right? We used to be on a team and now we're working together, right? And I'm your manager. Put it on the table, right? Say, hey, I'm a manager. How can I support you in the best way, right? All that sets you up for servant leadership. Next questions. There's one in the chat. What are examples of yes, no questions that one can ask to adopt mentors? A lot of it depends upon the circumstance that you're in. But let me give you some examples. And again, to adopt mentors, it's along the path. And for those of you that don't know what I'm talking about, take a look at the book. There's several, one particular chapter, but then several references to mentoring, adopting mentors, etc. But examples are, look at the skills that the person that you admire has, right? And therefore figure out how you can ask something simple that will be easy for them to understand and answer without having to make a big commitment. That's really where it starts. So that's why I say it depends upon the person. So if you're trying to reach out to a person who, let's stick with public speaking. We talked about Toastmasters and things earlier. Then what you might say, like if you were coming to me, right, for instance, what you might say is, Shellye, I've seen you speak and you really do a great job. I've got a speech coming up in about a month, right, for blah, blah, blah. What were your two best pieces of advice, right, for giving a good speech? Now, if I'm already a speaker, I'm an acknowledged speaker, I don't have to sit there and do research or really think about it, right? Off the top of my head, I'll be able to answer that question. The key in coming up with the questions to ask people are you want to ask questions that they can answer off the top of their head so they don't have to invest and therefore they won't defer, right? They'll just give you a quick response. So you have to take the time to actually understand the people that you're trying to target and what their skills or strengths appear to be, and then play into that. That's the best way to figure out what questions to ask. I love how you refer to adopting mentors. Have you ever mentored up? Absolutely. Absolutely. But it's interesting. When mentoring up doesn't mean that somebody came down to me and said, I want you to be my mentor, right? It just means that you try to provide an environment in which you could help and support them, right? And let them grow. I'll give you an example. This was back in my IBM days, and I was a second line manager. So, but what that means is I had people reporting to me who also had teams reporting to them. Well, we had gone through this big exercise with my boss on trying to get funding for a new initiative. And he had told us that, hey, this is really in the bag. He's greased the path, right? His boss is all supportive. We just have to do the work to put in the actual proposal, the numbers, the business plan, et cetera, but this is going to happen. Well, we did it, and we must have spent like 6 weeks, 6 or 8 weeks working on this. So we get it done. He's going to present to his boss, and then we're all going to meet afterwards. So we're waiting for him to come back. He comes back totally dejected, literally head down the whole bit, just like, oh, she let us down. We didn't get the funding after everything we've done, blah, 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 blah. I mean, he was just down, down, down. And so all my peers are thinking, man, we just wasted 6 to 8 weeks doing something. So everybody's starting to basically go in a downward spiral about this is horrible and terrible and blah, 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 blah. Well, I was sitting here thinking, wait a minute, we're the leadership team. We can't walk out of this room acting like, we've had this big failure dealt to us, because the whole team will then start to feel like failures, right, in terms of what's going on. So I took the initiative to basically say, hey, wait a minute, right? We didn't get money for a new initiative, but we have the same budget we had. So there's still things that we can do with regards to pushing this forward by just making different trade-offs, right, and plans. Let's figure out how we go do this. Anyway, I started leading, right, to the positive side of this whole situation. Well, my boss caught on, and he then took the lead, and he led us, and we did it. Well, in a way, that's mentoring up, right? All mentoring it doesn't even have to be formal, which is what I learned right early on. It's really just providing an environment in which you can learn from others or people can learn from you. Next one in the chat. I see how I can share my goals with my boss and my boss's boss, but how do I share it with everybody else? How do I bring it up in conversation with peers? Great question. Sometimes you can do it by asking people what they aspire to, right? So when you have a moment and you're talking about things for business or whatever, right? What you might just say, and this is coming from Yanir, right? So I might say, hey, by the way, Yanir, right? You're really good at blah, 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 right? What are your aspirations? What are you trying to achieve in your career, right? You start by asking others what their interest or focus is. And they may or may not have it, right? I mean, it might be, oh, well, I aspire to be blah, 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 or I'm not really sure. I'm thinking about this or that, etc. But now you're in the conversation. Many times people then ask you back what you think you want to do. And then it gives you the opportunity to answer them. If they don't ask you back, it is also logical for you to just opine in. When they say, well, I'm not really sure, I'm thinking maybe this or maybe that, etc. You could say, I know what you mean. I spent a lot of time trying to decide what might be best for me, but I think I've settled in on blah, 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 right? So this doesn't have to be a formal, okay, I want to tell you what my goals are, right? Try to make it part of a conversation that you're having with others. And you'd be surprised how many times there are topics of conversation in which you can then share. Again, share not in a way of, hey, look at me, this is what I want to do, right? But share in a conversational manner. Hopefully that helps. Okay, next question. I want to know how to transition into sales and marketing from research. This is challenging. Whenever you're in like one discipline and you want to transition into a discipline that's not even adjacent. So research and sales and marketing, they're not even adjacent. So how do you do that? So one is, I don't know what company this is, etc. But if you're part of a company and research is one arm, but the company also has sales and marketing teams as part of the organization, start to build and forge some relationships in the sales and marketing side. And if you don't know anyone over there, then pick up the phone or send an email, right? This is when you can absolutely reach out to say, you might reach out to somebody in marketing or somebody in sales and say, hey, listen, I've been in research at such and such and such and such. I want to make sure that I understand kind of what the result of our research and our products does as it relates to interacting with customers. I think that'll help me do a better job, right? And I'd also really curious about how this part of the business works. Would you mind having and then you go, a Zoom, a call, or whatever, right? Just 15 minutes. Love to understand. So start to build or reach out. If you don't know, then just cold call. I talk about this in the book too. It's one of the things I did early in my career that just makes a big difference. And you'd be surprised. A lot of people actually like talking about themselves and about what they do. So if you reach out with genuine interest, I find that many times people will indeed respond. So that's one way. Another way because that way, if you do it within the company, then you can forge some relationships. And if you can forge some relationships, then you can figure out how, on your own, you might be able to actually be supportive, right, of work that they are doing. And then if you're supportive of work that they're doing, right, now this takes time because you're building the relationships, then you can let people know, I'm really interested in actually making a transition or doing a stint in sales or marketing. Please let me know if you know of any roles, right, that open up. So you can do it that way. The other way you can do it, and many people do this to change roles or change jobs, is you go get some education, whether it is a course or it's a degree or whatever. A lot of times doing that will then put you in a place where you can pivot. It's a lot of reasons why people get MBAs. They're trying to move from one spot to another spot, right? So that can happen too. Um, Also, look at activities that you're doing outside of work. Might be with nonprofits, right, et cetera, volunteer work, and try to do some work in avenues that involve sales or marketing so that you can start to get a better understanding of what all this is. Because trust me, before you make a career pivot, you want to make sure you know what you're stepping into. So those are a few things that I would share there. What are the common mistakes that women make that lower their chances of from getting, wait, let me read that again. What are the common mistakes that women make that lower their chances of getting from senior to executive positions? And what is your advice for senior professionals, 16 to 20 years, to practice ruthlessly to get to the top leadership positions? So, one of the things that I see that, frankly, I see for men and women, but I see more women do this than men, and that is they don't delegate effectively. In order to rise up, you have to demonstrate that you can delegate effectively. And delegating effectively means that you're able to get work done through others consistently, right? And with great results. Now, one of the reasons that holds people back is if you don't delegate effectively, then you personally have to spend a lot of time doing all these activities. When you're spending a lot of time doing all these activities, you aren't spending time doing what senior executives want to see, which is you need to spend time thinking about strategy, building relationships and networks beyond the company and beyond the organization. They want to see how you're contributing, right? And leading in on other things. So you need to have time and bandwidth to actually think and do these things, which is why you have to become very good at delegating. So that's one. Two, building up your sphere of influence within the company and outside the company is also important when it comes to getting into the senior roles. And again, you have to have time to be able to spend to do this, which is why delegating becomes important. And then third, taking risks. Companies, the whole notion and reason a corporation, that legal entity, was founded was to create an environment in which people could come together to take shared risk. A company doesn't grow, it doesn't expand, it doesn't launch new products, doesn't do any of that without taking risk. So you have to be able to demonstrate that you are willing to take risk, which means you're willing to sign up for big, audacious goals, right? And try to figure out how you're going to actually deliver on them. But those are the three things that I would say across the board. I think I saw something come in with the chat. How do you navigate instances where your opinion of your career potential does not align with your peers or leader? Here's where you have to be willing to make yourself vulnerable. So if you think more highly of yourself than your peers or your leader does, then there's obviously a mismatch. So take the time to genuinely try to understand their view of your potential. There might be something there. There might be an area or a blind spot. A lot of us have blind spots. We have things about ourselves that we just don't see. So the best way to learn about blind spots is by sincerely listening to others. So you want to ask for feedback, right? And you can ask for feedback from peers in terms of, but whatever is potential. You're working on things, getting things done, etc. You can ask them, hey, I'm really trying to improve my skills in, I'm going to make it up. Here's where you try to figure out where the concerns or issues might be, right? My skills in either effective communications, my skills in project managing, right? It depends upon your job and your role, etc. But you make it specific. Because if you ask people, hey, will you give me feedback? They're going to tell you you're fine. Why? Because that's easy and nobody wants to hurt anybody's feelings. So the best way to get real feedback is to actually be specific. Because when you're specific to say, hey, and I've been managing projects now for blah, 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 right? What do you think I could do to make the projects I run even better, right? Now, when you've done that, you've asked something specific. And I find that people will actually answer specific questions. So go to your peers and your boss, right? And then just start asking questions around feedback to try to understand, right, what it is. And for your boss, that should be a little bit easier because it's perfectly normal to have a conversation with your boss about what your aspirations are, right? And about how they might see you. For instance, if you aspire to be, I'm going to make it up, a vice president, and you don't think your boss thinks you have the potential, well, here's where you have to be vulnerable. You can have the conversation to say, one day I do aspire to be a vice president. Do you think I have the potential? Ask the question. Why? Worst they can say is no, right? Well, guess what? No is a great answer because if they tell you no, then you get to say, really? Can you help me understand why not? What don't I demonstrate? What don't you see? Right? What skill set? What experience? Whatever it is. And then when they tell you, now you can go fix it. If you never ask the question and you keep it broad, then you can never go fix it. So be willing to be vulnerable and ask specific questions, get the feedback. And then if you get consistent feedback, I would tell you that's probably something you need to work on. How can I reach my next professional goal, which is working for a US-based company, if my current job is so hard and demanding that they don't leave me time to do things? I currently work 12 to 15 hours a day, and I barely sleep. Well, if you're trying to change your situation, then I would tell you, you probably need to get a new job or figure out how you do this job effectively with less time, because I can't solve that for you. If you are working 12 to 15 hours a day, you're right. You don't have time to build skills. You don't have time to network. You don't have time to do anything. So you've got to figure out first how you make time to do those things. What's the most important risk you took and why? And how do you continue to grow and develop as a leader? Gosh, I took risks all through my career. And I do believe the decisions you make and steps you take influence what happens next. So when you say the most important risk that I took in my career, oh man, there were so many. One was picking the man I married. And you might sit there and say, what does that have to do with your career? Well, for me, it was a lot. I married someone that people around me didn't think I should marry, but I knew he would be the right person for me. And he was. He was an incredibly supportive husband. He passed away several years ago. And he was my cheerleader and he was my rock. And he shared my vision of me becoming a CEO. And so that was probably the biggest risk I took in terms of early on. But I took risks throughout. I moved often. I took on jobs that sometimes nobody else wanted because they were going to be hard, or took jobs of organizations, teams, or companies that were failing, right? We're not doing well. Those are high risk things. But what I found is that risk and reward are two sides of the same coin. So if you take the risks, then the rewards are actually outsized. And there are things that you can do to mitigate the risk. So I took risks all through my careers. Hi, Shellye. Do you have any tips for working with channel partners in the cybersecurity industry? I have my first sales territory as a regional account manager this year in cybersecurity sales. Thanks for all the great sales advice in the past year and a half. Yeah, well, if you follow me, you know I started out my career in sales. I believe sales is a great place to spend time, if not your whole career. What's my biggest advice? Spend time talking to the partners to understand what can make your company a better partner to them. And when you start on that front, then they know that you actually care about them and you're not just pushing stuff through the channel. And the key is to listen and to figure out what you can do. So if they give you 4 things that would be helpful, try to figure out how you do one of them or make one of them happen. And then you become an advocate for them and you have a basis on which you're building a relationship. So I always start, and it's true whether it's channel partners or it's customers, but I always start the same way in terms of that's the question, what makes a good vendor for you? What makes a good partner for you, right? Ask them and then take it to heart and figure out how you build that in to your overall strategy. When they have issues, when they have problems, right? Try to figure out how you can help them solve it. But that's how you become a valued partner that they then start to communicate with and not just see you as just a vendor. How do you address coworkers who feel you are not communicating well? Oh, no, the other way around. How do you address coworkers who you feel are not communicating well? Do you give them feedback? Do you give feedback to your manager, to their manager, or to the person directly? I always start with direct feedback because that's what I would want. I want somebody to come to me, not to my boss, not to whatever, right? At least first. And here's the key. When you go to them, don't say, hey, you're not communicating very well. When you do that, you put people on the defensive. Like, what? What do you mean, right? Instead, try to position in a way in which you're just trying to help make them better. And be specific. So if they've just sent out a note about a project, right? And there were things that just weren't clear in that, that's when you respond. You reach out to them. And by the way, pick up the phone, right? But you reach out and say, hey, listen, I just saw the note you sent on blah, blah, blah project. You may not realize it, but this section talking about XYZ really wasn't as clear. What is this? And then ask with the clarifying questions. And just say, hey, I just thought I'd share with you because others might have the same question and you might just want to send out a note. Right? Now you've helped them. So they see that as help and support, right? Versus criticism. If there are general things that they are just consistently not doing, for instance, when they communicate about things, they never set timelines, or they aren't clear about who they're talking to or what group, etc. Just try to be specific when you're giving feedback and let them know that you're just trying to help them, right? In terms of be better versus criticizing them. So it's all in the approach. Now, if after doing that a few times, you just don't see anything happening and their inability to communicate effectively is actually impacting your ability to execute, then you might need to raise it up, right? And you can just share. You can share with your own manager to say, I've had conversations with so-and-so, right, about this, that, or the other. Doesn't seem to be changing much. And it really is impacting my ability to get my job done, right? That's why you bring it up. If their communication challenges are not impacting your ability to get the job done, then don't raise it up because now you're just seen as somebody who's criticizing others, right? Do what you can, go to them directly, try to be helpful. But at the end of the day, you are not responsible, right, in terms of for them. So the times you bring it up is when it actually impacts you or your team and your ability to get things done. I'm from a small island in the Caribbean where it seems opportunities are few. How can an almost 30-year-old woman gain an opportunity to work in large overseas companies or promising exciting startups? How can I be seen? I'm currently in the finance field, but I'm open to other possibilities. I've never actually faced this challenge personally, so I can't say that I'm an expert in terms of how to do this, but what I would tell you is first place I'd start is the company you work for. So is the company you work for just a local company? Or is it actually tied to, right, a broader, maybe more global kind of company? If it's tied to a global company, then I try to work through my company, right, to see if I can get engaged in projects that are international, right, et cetera. So that's one. Two, if it's just a local company, then even within finance, there are organizations, industry organizations, et cetera, that exist that are actually international. Try to get involved in something so you can start to build some relationships within your field beyond, right, your island. Think about universities. Many universities even universities in Caribbean islands, et cetera, actually have ties and relationships with universities that are beyond, that are in the States, for instance. So maybe you just take a course, and you take a course because you're trying to build a relationship with the professor, right? To see about what you can do and what you can get involved in that may have a broader reach. Because many universities have a number of programs, webinars, seminars, et cetera, that are actually international. Because the key is you need to start building relationships that are beyond what you're currently doing. And that takes intention. So I can't tell you specifically which ones and what, et cetera, because I'm not in terms of the island. But if I were you, that's where I would start and say, okay, if you like finance, I don't know that you have to change your skill set or your area, but you need to figure out how you build your reach beyond. So think of associations, industry related, think of universities, right, in those ties. But that's where I would start. How can I work towards CXO roles? I would tell you to read my book. That's such I have no idea where you're starting from or no idea where you are. So I really can't give you anything specific. All I can tell you is I'm a big believer in setting goals and then working backwards, which is figuring out, okay, who are the people that are in the roles? What's their background? What's their skill set? What have they done? Right? And then how can I build those skill sets, get those kinds of experiences, et cetera, as I go forward. Okay, I see something coming in the chat. Have you seen instances where both careers in a marriage were able to achieve their goals, or should one be prioritized over the other? No, I've actually seen where two people together can achieve what their goals and aspirations are. The key is to talk about it. I'm amazed at how many couples actually don't talk with each other about what their goals and aspirations are, and then figure out jointly how they can help each other achieve both. Now, it doesn't mean that you can do everything all at the same time. It doesn't. It might mean things need to be staggered or staged, et cetera. A lot of it just depends on what kind of help, resource, and support you have, right? But it starts with having the conversation and understanding what does your partner aspire to? What is it they want? And then sharing what you want, what you're aspiring to, what you want, and then figure out together a game plan for how you both achieve it, right? Because when I say achieve it, I'm not talking about just career. A lot of times people get married because there's another set of things they also want to accomplish outside of career, whether that might be family, right? Who knows? But have the conversation. And I'll just take a quick aside because we're talking about career stuff here. But I was fortunate. My marriage before my husband passed was almost 35 years. And one of the key elements, I believe, to having a long-term successful marriage is actually communicating with each other what you see and what you want for the future so that you can grow together, so that you can support each other together. And many folks actually don't talk about that, not strategically. So, all right, off my soapbox on that. Okay. I need advice on how to ask for help at work and how to delegate without losing control of the work done. Okay, so ask for help. Asking for help, I think, is one of the most powerful things that you can do. Full stop. Because guess what? No matter what role you have, no matter what promotion you take, et cetera, I mean, odds are that somebody else has done the role before. Maybe not exactly, maybe not the exact same company, or maybe not the same specific, but close, right? So go find those people and talk to them and find out what they learned, what worked, what didn't, et cetera. Asking for help, it doesn't mean you have to walk up and say somebody help, right? No, asking for help just means asking for insight, asking for perspective, right? So I don't think it's that hard. I'm going to give you another book. Wayne Baker authored a book called All You Have to Do Is Ask. And the whole thing is about asking for help. So I'd recommend the book. The next question of how do you delegate without losing control? Delegation doesn't mean that you ask someone or a team, go do X and have it finished in 3 months. And then you come back 3 months later to find out how it went. That is not delegating. Delegating is having a team understand, okay, in 3 months, here's what needs to be accomplished, right? Needs to put together a plan of action, roles, responsibilities, timelines, etc. And then we're going to have checkpoints to see how we're doing against that. So the best way to delegate is to be clear on the outcome and the timeline, right? Have the team build a plan that you review, iterate with, etc. Once you've agreed on the plan, then you have checkpoints to make sure that people are on track or not on track. And you also want to set up the environment in which they know that if they run into challenges or problems or issues, that they should bring those forward quickly. Bad news should travel faster than good news, which means when they bring you bad news, you can't jump all over them because then they're not going to bring you bad news. Okay. But those are the ways that you actually delegate effectively. And there's tons of books on delegating too. Good news is there's actually a lot of information out there if you look for it. All right, next, when taking on leadership of a new team, what are the best things you like to focus on in the first 90 days? Did you address this one already? All right, well, maybe something close, but let me just say it in case people join later. First things I focus on are the team. Meet all the team, understand who they are, what they're heading, what's important to them, right, etc. Because whatever I have to deliver on, it's not going to happen without the team. So I spend time on the team. I spend time with the key stakeholders. And then I make sure that I understand what success looks like. And I can't overemphasize how important this is. Success does rarely equals the job description. So it's important to ask your boss, okay, I'd like to understand now for this new role, this new team, etc. I'd like to understand, what does success look like a year from now? What needs to be the case for you to consider that I had a successful year, right? And get specific. That way you know what it is that you need to do. And once you know what you need to do, great, build a plan to go achieve it. And make sure within those 90 days, you've got some wins that show that you are actually making progress, which is the other thing that's important. Leaders like people who hit the ground running, right? And make an impact sooner versus later. So find those quick wins. Make sure you get those things happening and make sure that you're communicating with your team, with your boss, with the stakeholders, that they understand, here's the plan, here's what we're trying to do. Because by understanding, they'll feel a part of it. And it'll make them more likely to want to support you on what you're doing. And make sure everyone understands what the value they have in the execution of the plan, right? Why is it important for your team members? Why is it important for the stakeholders? Why is it important for your boss? Okay. That's it. That was the last question I had. So any other questions in chat before we wrap this up? All right, I'm not seeing anything. Well, let me say thank you very much for tuning in. I do these once a month. Please just register on YouTube and then you'll get notifications when the next one's scheduled. And I look forward, for those of you who will join, to speaking with you in February. Meanwhile, have a great Martin Luther King Jr. Day. All right, bye-bye, everybody.